Before it had even begun, 2013 promised to be an interesting year in America's fiscal history.
Happy New Year, everybody.
After teetering on the brink of the fiscal cliff until the very end of 2012, Republicans in the Congress and the White House reached a last-minute deal to eliminate most of the tax increases that were due to come into effect this year. That deal did raise taxes on America's wealthiest 1% of households, and it also allowed a payroll tax cut to expire. But other fiscal events loom ahead that could prove almost as damaging and even more difficult to resolve. The fiscal cliff deal did delay Congress's 10-year plan to cut $1.1 trillion in discretionary spending, what's called the sequester. That is now scheduled to begin on March 1st. On that date, the first year's cuts, $85 billion by September, the end of the current fiscal year, are to begin taking effect. Thereafter, that annual cut would rise to $110 billion a year for the next 9 years.
I'll tell you right now, if you're looking at the kind of billions of dollars that we're looking at, we're going to have to squeeze awfully hard to try to be
Roughly half of these cuts will be to defense spending. The rest will be on domestic programs, affecting everything from education and training to airport and border security. Both Barack Obama and Republicans in Congress agree the sequester would be terrible, but they have been thus far more interested in blaming each other than in negotiating resolution, although on February 21st, Mr. Obama did call Republican leaders to discuss ways to replace it. March 27th is another date to watch. Roughly a third of the federal government's spending is authorized annually by Congress. Right now, however, it's being kept alive with a stopgap called a continuing resolution, which is due to expire on March 27th. If Republicans and Democrats in Congress can't agree on another extension, most discretionary federal spending will have to cease. That includes everything from operating the courts and the national parks, to education grants to state and local governments, to scientific research. Essential services like air traffic control and military operations will continue, however. Less than 2 months later, America's debt ceiling will be back at the top of the agenda. The Treasury was originally supposed to run out of legal authority to borrow in mid-February, but Congress voted to give it an extension and allow it to keep borrowing until May 19th. At that point, the legal limit will, once again, take effect. And then Treasury will begin so-called extraordinary measures so that it can borrow without breaching that ceiling.
The American people don't expect government to solve every problem. They don't expect those of us in this chamber to agree on every issue. But they do expect us to put the nation's interests before party.
If the ceiling still hasn't been raised by sometime in August, the government then risks defaulting on its obligations, either salaries to civil servants, checks to Social Security beneficiaries, perhaps in the extreme even defaulting on interest on the national debt. Now that's highly unlikely to happen. But if it did, it could trigger a devastating financial crisis, since so much of the global financial system rests on the sanctity of U.S. Treasury debt. Steering America's economy through these fiscal rapids will require both Mr. Obama and Republicans to give ground. They've done it before, but right now their appetite for compromise looks all but tapped out, guaranteeing many more fiscal nail-biters this year.